Kevin Durant is getting traded this offseason as rumors are swirling that the Suns are already in active trade conversations with multiple teams, and this feels like the first big domino that is about to fall in the NBA offseason. And the first team that continues to get mentioned with KD is the Houston Rockets. And the reason for that is very obvious. The Suns want their picks back if they're going to be trading away Kevin Durant, and the Rockets own a bunch of the Suns picks, including the 10th overall pick this year, which is actually the Suns pick originally. And it also makes sense for a Houston team that wants to take the next step, that has plenty of assets to add Kevin Durant, and his scoring and his perimeter production are exactly what this team needs, despite some obvious concerns with his contract and his age. So these two teams having trade conversations around Kevin Durant makes a ton of sense. The difference here is this is not a Kevin Durant situation that we have seen in the past where they're going to be able to get a ton of stuff in exchange for him and there's going to be this huge market. Teams are going to want Kevin Durant. Don't get me wrong. He's still KD, but he's getting older. He's only got 1 year left on his deal. And I think ultimately the Suns are going to have to be okay with getting less in exchange for KD than they initially anticipated. And there's already reports coming out that that is exactly what is happening between them and Houston right now. They want to make a deal with the Rockets. They want some of their picks back, and they're understanding now that what they traded for Kevin Durant a couple of years ago from the Nets, they're not getting anything remotely close to that from the Rockets in exchange for Durant now. So let's take a look at what the actual possibilities here are between the Rockets and the Suns. Right now, Jalen Green has to be at the center of this trade. From a salary perspective, in terms of assets, it just makes a lot of sense for Green to be the guy. He gets more room to grow in Phoenix. They replace him with KD in the lineup. That obviously helps their offense a ton. And if I'm Houston, I'm not offering Alperen Sengun. I'm certainly not offering Amen Thompson in exchange for Kevin Durant. And from a salary perspective, from an asset perspective, Jalen Green makes the most sense at the center of this. Next is someone like Dillon Brooks, who would have to be in the deal to make the salaries work. Keep in mind that the Suns can only send out one player in the scenario because of the second apron, so it's just KD. He makes $54.7 million next year. You have to get really close to that number in order to match salaries, and Jalen Green plus Dillon Brooks is almost exactly $54.7 million for next season. And then you get into the draft picks. What picks is Phoenix okay taking back in exchange for Durant? How much are they going to ask for, and how much is Houston willing to give up? Right now, it seems like a near guarantee that the 10th overall pick in this draft coming up would go back to Phoenix in this trade. And then the question is, do they get any of their other future picks back? Theoretically, you could give them just their 2027 first, and then this is what the deal would look like. Green, Brooks, the 10th pick this year, and a 2027 first. But if I'm Houston, that still kind of feels like too much in exchange for Durant, given his contract situation, given his age, and given the fact that they're going to have other opportunities this offseason to potentially add other stars, and they might not prioritize Durant as much as the Suns are prioritizing Houston as a destination because of the value of getting their picks back. If I'm Houston, I'm okay waiting on this particular deal. I would offer them Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the 10th pick in this draft, and I would see what else Phoenix can try and get in exchange for Durant. There's other teams we're going to talk about in this video, but I think Houston is going to be patient. They know that if it came down to it and Durant was still available and they wanted him, they are the team that can 100% go out and get him, because if Phoenix wants anything out of this, they want some of their future picks back, and they'd likely be willing to take less from Houston in order to get those picks back from them. And these reports that are coming out could just be all coming from the Suns trying to drum up some interest in Durant, trying to make it seem like it's imminent, because again, there's no guarantee that even with Kevin Durant's past connection with Ime Udoka as head coach and the obvious basketball fit here, there's no guarantee that Kevin Durant actually wants to go to Houston or that Houston actually wants him in the first place. But if it did happen, if Kevin Durant did get traded to the Rockets, I would imagine it would look like something similar to Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and give or take some of the picks on screen here. But that is definitely not the only team involved in Kevin Durant trades right now. The San Antonio Spurs continue to come up in these conversations, and a lot of the reports are that it's actually Durant and his camp that are trying to push towards going to San Antonio rather than maybe the Spurs being overly interested in Durant. Just like De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline, Durant is potentially deciding that San Antonio is a place that he wants to go to try and compete, and that's a place that he would like to try and force his way to. This right now for the Spurs brings up a very interesting situation, because in an ideal world, if you're San Antonio, if you're trading for Kevin Durant, you are doing a very picks-centered package. You're keeping De'Aaron Fox, obviously. You're keeping Devin Vassell. You're keeping Steph Castle, and obviously you're keeping Wemby. You're keeping those guys together, and you're trying to add Durant to that. And ideally, you're also not trading away the second overall pick in this draft for 37-year-old, 38-year-old Kevin Durant on a one-year deal. So with that in mind, if San Antonio did go to them and say, hey, we know KD wants to be here, let's make the deal happen, they could trade basically a bunch of nothing contracts, right? Like it's Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, guys that don't really have value, but at least it would match the salary for KD, and a bunch of picks. You've got the Atlanta pick this year, you got a second round pick, you've got some Atlanta pick swaps, you've got an Atlanta future first, you've got a Sacramento future first. Ideally, San Antonio would like to keep all of their own picks here. They don't want to give out any of their own first round picks because those are assets they continue to hang on to. Maybe they would have to get the Suns to be able to say yes to this, but in a scenario in which Houston's not all that involved, some of these other teams aren't all that involved, I would think that this would be at least something that the Suns would talk about. It's probably not enough for KD, even as much as his market has fallen. It's still Kevin Durant. It's still a guy that's an unbelievable player. And him just wanting to go to San Antonio doesn't guarantee that this is a deal that they would say yes to. There's no Sohan in this deal. There's no Steph Castle in this deal. But I think this is where San Antonio would start. If they're hearing KD would like to go there, they would go to the Suns and they would say, okay, you're not getting any of our core guys because of KD's contract situation, because of his age. We can give you a bunch of picks and we can give you some matching salaries. Take it or leave it. I think that's where the Spurs would be at right now. I could be wrong, but I don't anticipate them putting Devin Vassell or Steph Castle or even Sohan in the deal at the moment. Next is another team we've been talking about a lot lately, and that is the New York Knicks. The Knicks trade possibilities get complicated, but I wouldn't put it past them at all to do something pretty dramatic this offseason. They just fired Tom Thibodeau. That was already dramatic enough. And the Karl-Anthony Towns situation definitely seems up in the air, as does the Mikal Bridges situation, who needs an extension moving forward after next season. If you are the New York Knicks, you have two real options here. You can trade Karl-Anthony Towns or you can trade Mikal Bridges. Those are the two guys that you can trade in exchange for Kevin Durant. If you just feel like you need to shake up the roster, change the roster around, add more offense, just get Cat off the team, whatever the case may be. A Karl-Anthony Towns for Kevin Durant trade, straight up 1-for-1, does work technically salary-wise, and that's a deal that could make sense for both sides. You've got the Towns and Booker connection there in Phoenix. Those two guys are really close. They're on the same timeline. That gives the Suns kind of a duo to build towards moving forward. And then the Knicks get out of the Karl-Anthony Towns thing. They don't have to deal with his lack of defense anymore. They add KD, who's a big star, gives them more offensive firepower, so they're not relying so much on Jalen Brunson offensively. Then you've got this really cool, like wing trio of OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Kevin Durant. And then, of course, you have to go out and find a center. You have Mitchell Robinson, but he's not going to be a full-time guy for you at the 5. So you've got to figure that out. But if they can find another center, potentially trade Bridges for a center, whatever the case may be, then they've got a really interesting team. The other option would be Mikal Bridges once again at the center of a Kevin Durant trade. It's really the only other guy on the roster that makes sense. They're not trading Brunson, they're not trading OG, they're not trading any of those guys. And if they're not getting someone like Giannis, KD is someone that I could definitely see them taking a long, hard look at. And it keeps Cat at the 5 as either a trade option for a different 5 or just the guy that's on the team going forward into next season. The problem is it gets really difficult to match salaries with Mikal Bridges' $24.9 million salary at the center of this. That's still basically $30 million off of what KD makes, and you've got to match those salaries pretty closely, not to mention the fact that the Knicks are getting close to the second apron going into the offseason anyway. They are not one as of this moment if they renounce some contracts, but that's definitely a little bit iffy. It could be Bridges, Hart, some other contracts in that Washington first-round pick in exchange for Kevin Durant. If I'm the Suns, that doesn't really excite me at all, and if I'm the Knicks, I'm not trading away a bunch of rotation guys on a team that already lacks a bunch of depth. As bad as Josh Hart was at times in the postseason, I'd like to keep him around. This is not a deal that I'm probably doing if I'm the Knicks, and frankly, I don't really think the Suns would do it either, but that's the Mikal Bridges option, and the issue there really is just trying to make the salaries work as well as the Knicks' lack of picks moving forward. Some other teams to talk about here with KD. There's a bunch of teams potentially involved. We talked the other day about Minnesota. I'm not going to rehash that too much because I've talked about them a couple of times already as it relates to KD, but that's definitely an option. It depends on what happens with Julius Randle and Naz Reid and their free agencies, but they could do, Julius Randle plus some stuff. Maybe Dillingham's involved in exchange for KD. We know that there's a KD Ant connection, but the last team that seems to be a little bit of a dark horse, that seems to be an actual real option for KD, is the Atlanta Hawks. There's some logic here to adding Durant alongside Trae Young, giving him a legit star. Obviously, KD's older, but someone that helps them in an immediate sense. It doesn't necessarily get them to contention, but the East is not going to be very good next year. The Celtics are not going to be involved in terms of contention. We've got the Pacers and the Knicks and the Cavs and maybe the Bucks if Giannis stays, but like the Hawks could maybe convince themselves that Trae Young plus KD plus some other stuff maybe gets them kind of close to semi-contention in a very weak Eastern Conference. The problem is, and where this kind of starts and stops for me, is what they'd have to put in the deal, because salary-wise, Terrence Mann, George Niang, they have some contracts, but it doesn't really work unless someone like Jalen Johnson or Zachary Richeche is at the center of the deal. And even then, if it's Richeche, then you've got to put like a Kongwu in there, and then I don't know who I'm playing at the 5 because Capella's probably leaving this offseason free agency. And we're just getting into a territory of players being traded away that I'm just not comfortable in exchange for Kevin Durant. I really like Jalen Johnson. I really am not sure if I would trade Jalen Johnson with KD straight up right now if I was Atlanta, if the contracts even worked, which they don't. So then having him at the center of a trade with some other stuff going out doesn't make sense to me. Richeche, I would trade straight up in exchange for KD, but there's still a lot of upside and potential there. And if I'm the Hawks, I'm just not really sure where that is getting me, which leads me to the beginning of the video. There's a bunch of teams involved here. A bunch of teams are going to try and convince themselves that KD is the guy that they need, but I think ultimately it is a two-horse race at the moment. Houston is in pole position for Kevin Durant. They're having active conversations about who would give up what and who wouldn't give up what, but I really think there is a structure there with Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and some combination of picks that works in exchange for KD, that works for both sides. And then the other part of that would be San Antonio, because if KD doesn't really love the idea of going to Houston, maybe doesn't think they're quite close to contention, but does want to go play with De'Aaron Fox, play alongside Wemby, which it seems like everybody does, I could see him pushing his way to San Antonio and the Spurs being willing to give up a bunch of stuff, maybe even willing to trade someone like Sohan, maybe even someone like Steph Castle. I doubt it, but if KD's preference towards going to San Antonio is so strong, remember, he's a free agent in 2026 right now. Unless he signs an extension, whatever you're trading away for him could be just completely gone. So if Houston doesn't get the idea that he actually wants to be there and he wants to be in San Antonio instead, that could be a situation where KD can actually force himself to the Spurs. Right now, those are the two teams, a bunch of other teams involved, but if I had to guess, I think KD is getting traded to either the Rockets or the Spurs before the draft or on draft night.